Hey friends, it's TJ, and you're listening to Tea with TJ, where our love for tea, conversation, and self-improvement intersect. So let's take a deeper dive into my cup and let's have a chat. Hey friends, it's TJ. Welcome back to another episode of Tea with TJ, and today I have a very special guest, a good friend of mine, Kendra Holloway. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the folks listening and watching.
Hello, folks listening and watching. My name is Kendra Holloway. I am an artist based out of the New York City area. Originally from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and I love me some TJ.
Oh, I love you. And because I love you so much, I made sure that we had some masala chai for you today. Made you a little tea latte. Love that.
Yes.
So I have been doing this thing with guests for season 3. And I mean, I already know your story, but in an effort to get people who are listening to the show and watching on YouTube, just to get a little bit of background on who the guests actually are, could you tell me your story?
Up until what point?
Wherever you want to stop. I mean, I would say probably the journey to New York.
Okay.
It's probably the easiest.
Yeah. I was like, because there are many parts of the story. But yeah, I was born in a small town called Hopkinsville, Kentucky, that is right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. It's about an hour out. I grew up an only child, which was amazing in my opinion. Grew up in a pretty tight-knit, simple family background. My mom, my dad, God rest his soul. My grandmother was across the street from me. I grew up with a lot of cousins that became sisters and aunties that were cousins. And you know how that is in the Black family. That's exactly what my experience was. Yeah. The church was right across the street as well. Yeah. So I had no excuse not to be there. Luckily, my background wasn't so strict that I had to be there, 5 days out of the week. But definitely Sundays, that's where my behind was. And everything was pretty simple, pretty straightforward growing up, very country, very simple people. And I decided somewhere along the way that I wanted to be an artist. I saw Pee Wee Herman as a kid growing up. And my mother says that I used to wave to him goodbye at the end of his show. So if anybody grew up in the 80s and the 90s, then you will remember that Pee Wee Herman used to wave goodbye to all the kids at the end of his show. And because of the area that I grew up in, it was kind of a mixed bag of people from a lot of different experiences. Once again, I grew up in the early 90s, mid 90s, when, crack cocaine was still a thing, the AIDS epidemic was still a thing. So I was seeing a lot of these things happen really, on my block. I was seeing it happen to people that I knew and I loved and I respected. So I saw the arts as a way for me to introduce them to a world outside of their own. And I made a vow to myself that, I would one day be on the screen too. I would one day act out something for them so that they could dream again and they could love again and they could find themselves again. Right.
I love that.
Yeah. And so, I went to a regular high school. Shout out to everybody that went to Christian County High School in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Colonels. I went to high school, and during that time, I did different activities that would allow me to use my voice. So I was in like a lot of different poetry competitions as a kid. So I was flying back and forth to DC a lot because I found my way into poetry and as a way of, public speaking and I guess somewhat getting introduced to the acting thing. And then when it was time to go to college, I chose to go to a HBCU because quite frankly, in my area, although it was, it was pretty diverse. I would say that the population is, half and half. We're like a good Oreo maybe. But I wasn't seeing enough Black people excelling the way that I knew that we were in the world, and I needed to be exposed to that in a professional way. And so I chose to go to Clark Atlanta University. Shout out to the HBCUs. Shout out to Clark Atlanta Panthers. And I studied theater there. And it was a safe haven. It was beautiful. It was a glorious time to just be a student, to be comfortable in your skin, to learn the craft, as just a person without even thinking about color, because everybody around you was Black. Everybody looked exactly like you, right? So there was freedom in that. And I oftentimes talk to my friends now, and I have to remind them, like, God, we were really blessed and fortunate to be able to be in a space where we didn't, for 4 years, we got a break from just being a color, and we could just live out whatever we wanted to live out. And it was great, right? So I studied theater, started out studying theater, and then I switched over to television and film production, but I was still taking theater classes at the Alliance Theater and doing just different internships there. And then I eventually started working behind the scenes for Tyler Perry Studios as an intern. I worked for the PBS station as an intern. And after graduation, I had a great producing assistant job, and then I got laid off.
That's just the life as an artist.
That is the life of an artist, but I didn't know it was going to happen that damn fast. And when I got laid off, I just, I prayed about it, and it was very simply revealed to me that it was time for me to move to New York City, to actually take acting seriously, if that's what I wanted to do. So there was a certain kind of caliber of artistry that I needed to follow, a certain kind of, because I didn't go to conservatory for acting. And even though I was in an acting program, I did switch that major over. I really didn't have the traditional road that a lot of theater kids have. Musical theater wasn't really my bag. It was just like, I want to be like Pee Wee. I'm still at this HBCU trying to be like Pee Wee. And they say you got to study theater, then okay, then that's where I am. And then I found my way to New York City, and I met you in the small...
the bowels of the Palace Theater. Yeah. What was it, Annie at the time, I think?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah.
Such a long time ago. And I've kept you in my life ever since that moment. Yeah, that's amazing. I don't think I knew the specifics of your training at Clark Atlanta, though. Like, I didn't know that y'all had a thing at the Alliance.
Yeah, it was something that I found by chance. So the late great Carol Mitchell-Leon, who, if anyone looks her up, she was an amazing actress that was local to Atlanta. She was kind of over the theater department at Clark Atlanta University, and she was my advisor when I first got there. Lovely, beautiful woman, and I was so excited to work with her. But unfortunately, after my first semester there, she passed away from an illness. And, the department really wasn't the same after she left, because she was really the heartbeat of that department. Yeah. And so that kind of prompted me to, I wasn't interested in leaving in HBCU. I didn't really want to transfer because I had made so many beautiful connections with my friends and with professors there. And I was just close enough to my actual hometown where something went down, my family could come down the highway to come get me, right? So I wasn't willing to give that up. Yeah. So as a result, I just switched over to the next best thing, and that was television and film production. My dad had a radio show in my hometown for over 40, 50 years. And I grew up kind of watching him do all these things behind the scenes, and there was always interest there. But when Miss Leon passed away and I had to make a decision about staying at Clark Atlanta, the next best thing for me was to just transfer to a different major. And as my daddy told me, if you love something, you learn everything that you possibly can about it. So that means the behind the scenes as well as in front of. And so, and when that happened, I still wanted to act. I still wanted to kind of find a way to hone that craft. And what that looked like for me was showing up to Mr. Al Hamaker's office at the Alliance Theater when I found out that they were giving these free workshops. And I showed up there for a one-day free workshop. My I believe it was probably the end of my freshman year. And I just took this workshop, and I was on my way out, and I saw this man that worked there that was over the acting department. And he heard me talking about my love for acting and how I wanted to continue it. And he just found me in a room, and he said, hey, if you're serious about this, you can come in, like, let's just say 8 hours out of the week. I know you're a student.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, as your pay, you can take as many acting classes here as you want to. And I don't know if Mr. Al Hamaker is still around or not, but he definitely blessed me with the opportunity to be able to take real acting classes at that theater.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Come on, Black people. Y'all better do it down
well,
at
Mr.
Clark
Al
Atlanta.
Hamaker was white.
No, I'm saying at Clark. I'm talking about at Clark Atlanta. I didn't realize, what I was saying is that I didn't realize that Clark Atlanta had so many resources
Oh, yeah.
for a theater program when, I mean, I didn't go to an HBCU, but I've heard stories of people who have gone into the arts, and there's usually not a lot of funding around the arts at HBCUs, unfortunately. So I love that you actually had those types of experiences there. So when we chatted about having you on the show, I gave you a list of topics, and you chose the whole lived experience section, which, based off of your background and like the brief conversation that we've had thus far, I think kind of informs the direction that we need to go in, because it seems like you've had a lot of really cool experiences that have helped shape your life and have kind of like helped shape your trajectory as an actor, as a Black person. So I'm curious to know, is there, at current moment, is there a very specific moment that you can think of from, I'll say from late high school to now, that you think is, if it had not happened, you'd be in a different place?
Ooh, that's a tough question. From late high school until now, if that event had not happened, would I have been in a different place? Oh my goodness, that's such a deep question. Where'd you get these questions from?
That's what we do on Tea with TJ.
I wasn't prepared.
I know.
Oh my goodness, that has really thrown me off. An event had it not happened. Well, you know, I think my decision to step out on faith and leave Atlanta, Georgia, that was a huge thing for me, because, and I know everyone has their stories about moving to New York City, but you know, I think, well, for some people, the road is hard for them, but they have folks and they have situations that they can kind of lean on. And if they need to go back, then they can. Right. For me, it wasn't that easy.
Yeah.
I come from a hardworking group of people who, I don't want to say that they were necessarily dependent upon me going to college and making something great out of my life, but certainly it could have helped a lot, you know, and having a straight, narrow path and knowing exactly how I was going to do what I was going to do would have been very beneficial. But me and my wild, you know, dreamy self, you know, I said, I was like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even that I really wanted to. Once again, I'm really always trying to keep my ear out for what it is that God wants me to do, what the next move is. Yeah. And when it was time for me to leave Atlanta, it was very clear for me. Yeah. Once again, I got laid off from my job. I had lost the apartment that not lost it, but I wasn't able to renew it because I didn't have money. I had moved in on the couch with a friend of mine who was going through some health issues. And I found myself kind of in this caretaker position. And it just was not what I signed up for. Not that I didn't want to help my friend, because I did, but the life that existed there was very clear to me that if I did not move, that God was going to make it very difficult for me to stay in Atlanta. And so literally, people who know me, you included, know this story, that when I showed up to New York City, I had an unemployment check, money, because I had cash check. It was about $50 in my pocket. And I got a one-way Greyhound ticket. No, actually, no. Let me tell the truth. It was a two-way, because I had enough money to get back. But I did get on a Greyhound all the way from Atlanta to New York, because my friend Aaron, shout out to Aaron, was graduating from NYU, and he just invited me to come up to see his final performance. And I was only supposed to be in New York for 4 days. And on that, in that 4-day time frame, I had seen his performance, went to my first audition. I had applied for a job, gotten the job, and was trying to figure out, well, if I got a job here, and if they're saying that I can start on Monday and I'm supposed to be back, how's this going to work? And, you know, somebody had called somebody that knew somebody, and the somebody ended up being my now friend Valton, who lived here. And he is also a phenomenal performer. And he said, hey, I live in this house. You don't know me or the people that live in this house, but if you need a place to stay, like immediately, we have a couch, and you are more than welcome to stay here. It won't cost you a dime. Yeah. Good thing, because I didn't have a dime. Yeah. And so I'm literally walking down the street trying to make up my mind what I'm going to do. Opportunities here, no matter how big or small, they are here in New York. Nothing is going on in Atlanta. And, you know, this houseless man on the street, he just came up to me. He didn't ask me for anything, but he just looked at me and he said, you know, whatever you're thinking about doing, you should just go ahead and do it. I said, huh? And then he started telling me the story about how he had lived his life for so long based off of what other people wanted him to do. And it had led him down a road of such great depression and just not being satisfied with where he was in his life. And he was like, do not make the same mistakes that I have made. If you are thinking about doing something right now, and it looks like you are, you need to go ahead and do it. Well, and he just walked right off. And I knew that. I was like, okay, that was clearly an angel. God is clearly talking to me. I need to stay here. Yeah. And that was it. Jesus. Wow.
That is amazing, because I feel like we've had moments together living in the city and working together, where whatever you want to call it, God, the universe, has shown up and manifested in multiple ways to help direct you into whichever direction you might be leaning towards. I feel like you know this story, that when I finally decided to leave that place, and take a leap of faith to go on tour and not stay, because it wasn't about the money. It was because I needed to do it for myself, and I needed to prove to myself that I could do it. But we're not talking about me. We're talking about you.
No, but this is good. Keep it going.
But yeah, it's interesting how the universe will do that and will really show up when you least expect it, but also when you most need it. And I also feel like New York specifically, I don't know what it is about New York City, but there seems to be like a crossroads or like a portal or whatever you want to call it, something that is here energetically that kind of syncs you with the universe in those moments. Because I feel like, thinking about what you just mentioned, of like you being on the street at that particular moment, and this person who doesn't know you, sensing, probably not even visually seeing that you're, thinking about making a decision, but sensing that off of you in a crowd of thousands, and being able to clearly articulate that to you. I'm like, that's magical. Yeah. That's the universe. That's God. That is very intentional. And those are the moments that I really love.
Yeah.
In New York.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's an entire walk of faith. And it's funny because I was just thinking about that today, during some just like meditative time, about like what sacrifice really means, and what, like, people, God, the universe, what's really expected out of us when we're being asked to give our last. But I don't think it's really the last that we're being asked to give. I think sometimes we're being asked to give what we value at that moment. Yeah. Because that is the thing that will be tested. Because there's a new value that's coming in. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's interesting that this is a space, but I guess, there's so many people that are here. There's so many energies that are here. And that's a beautiful thing about this city. Yeah. About a lot of metropolitan cities is just the fact that, what are the odds that you meet someone who has possibly gone through something tremendous in their lives? Like, you will come across people all the time, every single day. So yeah, it is. Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah. I literally had a moment with someone today before we met that I went and hung out with for a little bit. And it was interesting because we were talking about what we do, and he's a dancer and has been on cruise ships for the past 10 years, but has decided to stop. And ironically, I'm currently working back in the Midtown area. And he told me, he was like, oh yeah, I had a gig on 45th and 8th or whatever. And I was like, what time? And he was like, between 6 and 10. I was like, we were in the same space yesterday. And it's so many moments like that where I'm like, you have no clue the degree of separation or the close proximity that you might be to someone until you get to know them or have, an interactive moment like that. Yeah. And there's so much of that in New York that is, it's baffling to me, how close things actually are and how small the city actually is.
Yeah. And the meaning behind all of it. I mean, I even feel honestly, I'll let you continue.
No, go ahead.
Well, I feel every time you and I, because we've been knowing each other for so long, and there was a time when we would hang out all the time because first of all, we worked together. And folks, when you work on Broadway, you work 6 days out of the week. It's not 5, it's not 4, it's 6.
It's 6.
So literally everyone becomes family. But I feel since leaving that part of the industry that we left working together, and then every time that we met up since then and reconnected, there's always been, I know that whenever I see you, that there is a shift that is happening with either both of us or one of us. But I know that the reason why God has placed us in a position together again is to remind each other that it is okay to let whatever it is that we are thinking about, letting it go and move on to another thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I have felt all of that. And I think the moment that I am taken back to is when I was at Disney, and it's very vivid in my mind, and I don't know why the circumstances lined up the way that they did. But I remember I was at Disney. I had just left work, and I was sitting at a Starbucks not that far from Animal Kingdom. And I remember us being on the phone. And I remember how I was sitting. I remember what I was looking at. I remember what I was drinking. And we were having this conversation about me returning to New York and trying to navigate what does it mean to be in the union, and how is life different? What am I walking into? Because I think I came to you for counsel because you had your card at that point for almost 2 years or something.
It wasn't quite, maybe 2, something like that. I remember where I was when this conversation happened too.
You had it for a minute and you were actively doing it, and I sought counsel in you and wanted to just pick your brain and try to figure out what I should be doing. Or what I should be trying to how I should capitalize on the moment that I actually had. And then the fucking pandemic happened and it ruined everything.
Yep.
So that never happened.
Well, no, you got in the union before it ruined everything.
But I wasn't able to actively.
But you got in the union.
Yes.
Okay.
Touche. You're right.
What do the kids say now? A win is a win is a win is a win.
You're right.
Okay.
Sweet Jesus.
Amen.
So I love this. So, do you think there is any other like pivotal moment in your life that you can recall that has really kind of like shifted your perspective on life or shifted your trajectory? Since you mentioned every time we've seen each other, we've had these shifts.
There's so many things. What time frame are you going to give me now?
I'll let you. I'll let you pick.
High school until now, and I mean everything,
Yeah.
everything. Every time I wake up, there's a moment, and I'm like, "Ooh, I changed my mind."
Do you think is there a singular moment that you can think of that was pivotal in maybe your career? Let's go there.
In my career, I feel like all those seeds were planted so early on, and every project has been different. And everything has been different surrounding those different projects. So it's hard to say like a moment in career. Well, now you got me thinking, and I'm like, what is it? There have been so many things. Like, I remember not getting paid a lot as a non-union actor.
Okay.
And having to make some serious decisions about going back to a regular 9-to-5 and balancing a regular 9-to-5 and also trying to do a show. And when you are doing non-union work, for anyone who is not, doesn't know this world or whatever, but when you're doing a lot of non-union work, people feel as though they can ask you to do whatever and you will show up because it is your responsibility to do so.
Yeah.
Not taking into consideration that, hey, I still have a job and I'm not like, this job is going to be over with. This acting job is going to be over with in like the next 2 months. And I still got to make rent and I still got to do all these things. And you want me to be available all kinds of, hours of the day. And I can't just tell my job no, like there has to be a balance. But I remember, the last time that I took a non-union theater job. And I told myself then, I said, you know what, this balancing act is not working. This will be the last non-union job that I take it. So if that means that I have to wait another year or two before I take an acting job in order for me to like actually get my union card and at least have some rules and regulations around the hours that I will be working, the hours that I'm, available and the benefits that come with that, then I will wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do when, we're actors. I mean, sure, you can stand out on the corner of New York City and, recite Shakespeare, but are people going to pay you any attention?
Exactly.
You might look. We're not musicians in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, you're musically inclined, but so I remember making that hard decision that no. And I guess it's the same way with also like, indie films and films that you don't get paid from. And then having to set some serious boundaries around what you will do, what you won't do before you get that SAG card, And I remember having to make some tough decisions with some people to say, I'm sorry, I can't do any more free work.
Yeah.
Or if I do free work, then it has to come from like folks that I really, really trust and I can really collaborate with and I believe in them as artists and I will I will stand 10 toes down for them in every situation. But yeah, like having to make those kinds of decisions have always been, it's a part of the story. And those are obviously like pivotal moments that like really, teach you how to place value on yourself and what to expect and what not to go for. So
I will say, I think the moment that I was approaching getting this union card, I could feel this shift and like kind of this weird frictional vibrational thing happening where I knew I was like, I'm getting close. Yeah. And when it finally happened, and I will say fast forward to being back in New York and being able to go to EPA's to just walk in.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. To just be able to walk in without having to do the whole non-union jumping through hoops thing that we used to do. I have now realized that I actually have value as an actor who looks and sounds like me, especially in musical theater. And before that, and I think a lot of non-union actors probably have thought this way, or at least a lot of non-union actors of color have thought this way, that we're showing up, yes, to be seen, yes, to potentially book a job, yes, to, meet a casting director or whatever. But we're also trying desperately to hold our own in a room where there's three of us, or one of us, or you're the only one. And I remember being a non-union actor and going to some of those calls, knowing that I was right for the part. There being maybe like one other black guy there.
Yep.
If that, but then seeing everybody else and seeing all of them just so happened to be union, but conveniently it seemed that the non-union people were the people of color.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of satisfaction now when I'm able to go to calls and show up like the people who used to show up when I sat there.
Yeah.
And just go in and sing and do my thing. And I'm like, oh, I feel valued in this moment because I'm able to show up and do my thing and know that I actually have what it takes to compete with the people who are both there with appointments and also the people who are waiting who are non-union.
Right.
Who probably are just as good. But because this standard that we have when it comes to being in the union, they're being told that they're not as good as union members.
Have you had an opportunity to like mentor anybody who is non-union? And when I say mentor, I mean like, yes, take them up under your wing, but even just like have a conversation with someone who you maybe like see pieces of yourself in to say,
I have not met anyone like that yet because I think so many of us who have gone through this journey are now all on the other side of it and have our cards. So we've been in the thick of it together, and now we're all seeing each other win. Another guest on the show, Arnold Harper, we have been circling each other at auditions for years. And we finally like sat down and met. I think it was 2020 when I first came back. But he was a guest on the show as well. Yeah. And we have a very similar trajectory when it comes to roles. He's a baritone-ish. I would say he has higher notes than I do. But we will get called in for a lot of the same things. Yeah. But we are both, doing the thing, and I feel like I want to say I think he was union when we met. Like when we met in person finally. But we were going to those like EPAs and sitting outside and waiting to be seen.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah. But I've not had anyone who is non-union that I've met yet. Most of the people that I see regularly are in it now. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for
having me. I greatly appreciate it. You have been somewhat of an inspiration for TOTA because I feel like we had conversations like this all the time. So thank you. But before we go, last 3 questions.
Oh Lord, this is a speed round or something?
No, it's not a speed round. Okay. It's what I call the last 3. It is merely just, you can answer how freely you want. They can be 1-word answers. They can be a full description, but it's mostly to get a little nugget of knowledge out to our listeners.
Blue. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
What brings you the most peace?
These days? Knowing that I have a Father in heaven who is looking down on me and watching out for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Where do you find joy in the world?
These days, running.
Okay. All right. Love that.
Running brings me a lot of joy.
I see you running all the time.
I run all the time.
And then last question. Where does your heart live?
I was about to give out my mama's address, but I will not.
Okay.
Because she's still there.
Mm-hmm.
In Kentucky.
There you go.
In
All
Kentucky with my people.
All right.
I'm still little Kiki
Mm-hmm.
from Hopkinsville, Kentucky.
I love it.
And my heart will always, as much as I try to run away from it.
Yeah, that's true.
For as long as my folks are there, my
Mm.
heart will always be there.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yay. Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Where can the folks find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Kendra, the number 2, SHAY. So that's Kendra Touche. Don't go to Facebook because I'm not really there like that. Also, I have a podcast and a platform called The Melanated Archives. You can find us on Instagram at The Melanated Archives. You can also go to TikTok now at The Melanated Archives _ So that's where you can find all the things.
And for listeners of the podcast, can they find you on all the platforms?
Yes.
Perfect.
And if you can't, just let me know. But we supposed to be there.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. This has been a long time coming. I love you dearly.
I love you.
So, and with that, I will see you next week.
Peace.
And that's our show, friends. Thanks for joining us on Tea with TJ. Please rate, review, and subscribe. And you can find us on Instagram at Tea with TJ Podcast. And as always, stay kind, keep sipping, and remember, we're here, so we might as well do it.